1. I work for a franchise of restaurants that everyone in the United States has heard of, Taco Bell and Subway specifically. I drive around to all the locations my company owns and do maintenance. As in, I do my best to fix whatever equipment, point of sale, or general issues the stores have. On this particular day, I'm at a Subway that has had the worst issues of all. Their hot water heater has failed. This means the store can't open because no hot water means no proper hand washing, no proper dish cleaning, and according to health and safety, if a restaurant has no hot water, they have to either shut down immediately or stay closed if the store hasn't opened yet. Thankfully, the store hadn't opened yet, so they just have to stay closed until my boss and I can change the hot water tank out for a new one. We're about halfway through replacing the old with the new when our Karen appears in the drive-thru. Surprisingly, she does not have the typical haircut of most Karens, but she does have the attitude. The manager of the store tries to explain to Karen the situation, and that she won't be getting food from this location. Karen, however, had a mobile app order, so she had already paid for food, which is a major crux of this issue. These apps don't send the restaurants the money from each individual order. It comes through as a large lump sum at the end of whatever the app deems as a pay period. So the store literally couldn't help Karen, and she keeps insisting while getting louder that either the store makes her food or she get a refund, neither of which will be happening. Eventually, after arguing with the lady for at least 10 minutes while my boss and I were trying to install a new water heater, the manager came over to us and asked if there was anything we could do to help. So being the naive young worker, I walked over to the drive-thru window to try to explain what was going on, and that she would either have to leave and contact the app's customer support, or she could go to another location. I called and explained our situation to get her subs. The other location was more than happy to make her food for her, and it was only about 2 miles north of where we had been located. However, Karen had decided at this point that she no longer wanted food and would only like a refund, which because she ordered on an app the store could not give her. I tried to explain to her that she would have to contact the customer support of the app for a second time after a tirade about the store being lazy and we could just give her cash and it being that easy. The store hadn't been open, so we couldn't just give her cash. Even if the store was open, she had ordered on an app, so there would be no refund to give anyway. At this point, I looked at her and said, "Okay, either you can leave now or you will be trespassed and we will call the police." She essentially dared me to call the police, so I shut the window, dialed 911, and went back to installing the new hot water tank. A few minutes later, police show up and tell her that she will either have to drive away or she will be arrested for trespassing. Thankfully, this got through her thick skull and she drove away. My boss and I finished installing the water tank after watching the police kick her off the property, and about 6 months later that store closed for good, so nobody would be getting subs from there. 2. A few years ago, if you consider 25 to be a few, I was in the American military for half an hour, apparently. Here's how it happened. This, by the way, was in the UK. After a strenuous period of work, I was given a few weeks off to relax and decided to head down and visit a very old and dear friend of mine who owned a large property near a military base. This proved to be a mistake, as obviously it was incredibly noisy due to the arrival of a large number of American troops for some sort of joint training exercise. I got myself some earplugs, a book, and relaxed in the backyard, while my friend who ran a nearby pub was serving booze and roast dinners. I had just gotten to chapter 6 of a book, and was dozing off when my nap was interrupted by the increasingly loud, enraged scream of what turned out to be a large, bald man who looked like he would be wearing sunglasses, if he could possibly get away with it. Before I knew it, I was in an arm lock, being dragged across the garden to the gate and dragged down the street, cutting through a large amount of dragging, yelling, and not listening to me at all. We arrived in an office, where I was handcuffed to a chair. Enter Provost Robotnik, a large man with an amazing red mustache and no other visible hair. Conversation is approximate because 20 years. Also, at the time I was not in the best mood for observation.
Son, you were caught in the yard of some local. What do y'all gotta say for yourself?
Sir, I have no idea what's going on. I'm just here with a friend.
Soldier, wait. You're not even American, are you?
Someone just came in and grabbed me. I was born down in Cornwall. At this point, the man just goes entirely red. I mean solid red. Pulsing vein, gritted teeth, the works. The fact his mustache was vibrating was, after the fact, fascinating. He screamed something in a pitch too military for us mere mortal ears to understand, and 3 men just materialized. I swear no one opened a door. They were just there. The man who had dragged me in was manhandled rapidly into the room, at what I understand could very quickly become gunpoint if needed. I was unlocked, released, and escorted back to the garden, with Robotnik profusely apologizing the whole way. Later, I was told in the pub that the man who had arrested me was up for some sort of promotion, and was looking for any tiny thing to gain an edge, and a skiving soldier was just the thing. No one had any idea why he thought I was one. I still exchange Christmas cards with several of the soldiers, and Provost joins us every few years for a roast dinner in the pub. I think he's actually gained weight. 3. When Grandpa Jesse died 17 years ago, Jay started taking care of his grandma, as she's had a lot of health issues. He was doing this when we got together, but it was really interfering with his job. Also of importance here, Grandma and Grandpa only have 2 kids, Larry and Mike. Larry is the older sibling. Larry and Cheryl have 2 daughters. Both Larry and Cheryl were registered nurses, so both were qualified to help take care of Grandma, but never did. Only came around for birthdays and holidays and left as soon as they got their cash and gifts. Relevant backstory. I took care of my maternal step-grandma as some health aide for 6 years before she passed from cancer. I was doing this when Jace and I got together. When my step-grandma passed, Jace asked me to step in and help out with Grandma, mainly doing housework. I was happy to do so, as she was a very nice lady and had been helping us financially for a bit when Jace got laid off. During this time, his dad Mike was still working and had his own house, but came around to help when he could. Larry was living in the basement apartment at Grandma's at the time, but I rarely saw him and he never did anything to help out. What started as just housework eventually morphed into a full care situation, as Grandma had a few falls and other health issues that necessitated this. I didn't mind. We agreed on an hourly rate and things moved forward. Over the next few years, Larry moved back home and Mike moved in because he lost his house to foreclosure. This actually helped me out as I had another person to rely on for overnight care for Grandma. 2 years ago, Sierra stepped in to help me out and took over fully 1 year ago when I had to quit due to a badly broken ankle. On to Grandma passing. Originally, Elaine and Jesse had both named Larry and Mike as joint executors of their estate and co-beneficiaries for the house that they had built. Due to Larry's lack of involvement with her care over the years and the fact that he kept taking money from her account without asking, even though he'd pay it back, she decided to remove him from the house and rewrite her will to name only Mike as executor. She wanted the house to stay in the family. Larry just wanted to sell it for the money. Mike only wanted the house. Mike didn't care about the other monetary assets. She was in the process of taking Larry off her accounts when she passed. Larry found out then that he wasn't executor anymore. Mind you, she didn't completely disinherit him. He's still entitled to 50% of the estate. The money in her account was supposed to be split between the grandkids, Larry's included. Mike called Larry to let him know that Grandma had passed, and he was waiting for the nurse to confirm. Larry said he was on the way. For context, he lives 15 minutes away. He didn't show for 2 hours. Come to find out, he emptied her bank account before she was even legally declared dead. I told Mike I thought that was illegal and he should press charges, but at the time, Mike didn't want to because it's his brother. Mike still had Grandma's medical bills to pay, plus the inheritance for the grandkids. That was supposed to be paid out of that account. Funeral goes okay, but Larry refused to speak about his own mom. Mike was the only one who did. At the funeral, Larry made a big deal about thanking me for taking care of his mom, which I politely responded to. Then at the luncheon afterwards, he makes a passive-aggressive comment about Mike and Sierra not crying at the funeral, implying that only himself and Jace and I were grieving. A few days later, Larry and Cheryl show up at the house. Larry sends Cheryl to the door to ask for the death certificate. Mike goes out to talk to Larry and explains that he needs it for settling the estate, and if Larry wants one, he can go to the court and get one. Larry and Cheryl peel out of the drive, screaming about taking Mike for all he has. Grandma drew up a ladybird deed, aka a quick claim deed for the house when she rewrote the will. So immediately Mike goes and files it to put the house in his name. Then a week later, Larry's lawyer sends a letter fishing for info on what was paid out to myself and Sierra for her care, implying that half of that money was his. But that's ridiculous, because he's not entitled to anything she spent while still alive. So, at this time, Mike has submitted everything to probate court because Larry has made comments about contesting the last will, trying to say she wasn't of sound mind at that time, just because she was bedbound. This couldn't be farther from the truth, though. She was sharp as a tack until the last week. Mike has since decided that he will be taking every penny he's entitled to, his 50%, instead of giving it all to Larry like he'd originally planned. Mike got the house, which was all he wanted. All of this has cast a pall over everything and is making it almost impossible to actually grieve Grandma. I loved that woman like she was my own. I'm more worried about Mike, Jace, and Sierra, though. Mike has lost a brother, and Jace and Sierra have lost an uncle because of this. This whole thing is hard enough for me, but it's worse for all of them. Grandma was the glue that held them all together. 4. From the mid-90s through early 2000s, I've spent my summers working as a counselor at a Boy Scout summer camp. I've worked in several different program areas, but this story happened when I was the director of the rifle range. Every week we would get a new group of campers, and when they came up to the range for orientation, I would go over all the safety rules. I would finish by telling the kids, "You all get one warning on this range, and this is the warning. There are only 2 safe directions to point your rifles, up in the air or downrange. It doesn't matter if your gun is loaded or unloaded. If you break this rule and deliberately point your rifle in any other direction, you will be kicked off this range, and will not be allowed to shoot here for the rest of the week." I would go over all of these rules again for the kids on the first day of merit badge classes to satisfy the safety rule requirement for the badge. And there were plenty of posters hanging around the range with all of the safety rules on them. In other words, there were no excuses to break them. One day, the scouts in my merit badge class were practicing shooting for the test they had to take at the end of the week. One scout, the entitled kid of this story, thought it would be funny to point his rifle at another scout and spout off some random action movie line. I ran up and snatched the rifle from his hands and yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" The entitled scout responds, "The gun wasn't loaded." "Recite the safety rules now." The entitled scout recited them all, including the part about pointing the gun in a not-safe direction. I told him to hand over his shooting ticket. I tore it in half and said he was done on my range for the rest of the week. Later that afternoon, the range was open for free shooting. Everything was going smoothly until I noticed the entitled scout walking up the trail towards the range with his father, an assistant scoutmaster, who was built like an NFL linebacker. After the round of shooting ended, I called a ceasefire and told my assistant to keep an eye on the range while I handled the situation that was about to happen. As I approached the entitled scout and his father, he jumped up and down, pointed at me and yelled, "That's him! He's the one who tore up my ticket and kicked me off the range!" He looks at me and yells, "You're gonna get it now. My dad's a cop, and you're gonna be sorry for what you did." Before I could get a word out, Cop Dad gets in my face and started chewing my ass out drill sergeant style. Now, this story happened so long ago that I don't remember exactly what Cop Dad was shouting. I mostly remember the shit-eating grin the entitled scout gave me as he watched his father tear me a new one. I just stood there quietly and patiently, waiting for my turn to respond. Finally, Cop Dad said something along the lines of,
"So what do you have to say for yourself?"
"Yes, I did tear up your son's shooting ticket and kicked him off my range. But did your son mention why I did that?" Cop Dad's face went from angry to inquisitive. He blinked in rapid succession as he said,
No, now that you mention it, he didn't tell me why."
We both turned our attention to the entitled scout. His smile faded and he shrunk in our presence as he realized that his plan had just backfired. I loved returning the same shit-eating grin that he gave me a few moments earlier. To the entitled scout's credit, he did tell the truth. He probably knew better than to lie to Cop Dad. And if looks could kill, the look on Cop Dad's face would have killed his son several times over. After a moment of silence, he finally said, in one of the most intimidating voices I've heard in my life,
"Go back to camp and wait for me at your tent. I'll deal with you soon."
The entitled scout left to the tune of Dead Man Walking. Cop Dad turned to me and apologized for getting angry and chewing my ass out before knowing all the facts, to which I accepted his apology. For the rest of the week, Cop Dad would come to the range every day during open shoot my rifles, and would hang out and talk with me. Turned out he was actually a pretty cool guy. At the end of the week, he told me that when they get home, he will finish his son's rifle shooting merit badge, and he'll make sure that his son will never disrespect a firearm again. 5. So this happened, I want to say like 8 or 9 years ago. I just received my driver's license, and as one does after getting them, I regularly borrowed my dad's car to go for a ride with my friends. Some more context. In high school, I was very close with one female friend, Amy. We were chatting almost daily and spending time together regularly. Nothing happened between us, as she wasn't exactly my type, but she was fun to be around, so we were just friends. As you can imagine, her boyfriend, Picasso, for his immaculate drawing skills, didn't like this. But he didn't say anything to her, nor to me, but you could tell he was grinding his teeth every time we were goofing around. So one gloomy late autumn, early winter evening, me, my best male friend Jack, my other friend Amy, Picasso, and some randoms we knew, but weren't exactly close with, were playing pool at a local place and just generally having a good time. I think it was around 10 p.m. when Amy's boyfriend went home and left her with us. You could tell he was pissed about something, I wonder what. So around an hour passes, and we decide to go home as well. As I was the only one with a car, I was tasked to deliver everyone home as well. As we come to my dad's car, I was surprised. Every window had dicks drawn on it, multiple dicks. No one said anything, but we all knew who did this, or at least I did for sure. Road ahead was pretty quiet. No one spoke a word. When me and Jack were the only ones left in the car, we came to the same conclusion. Picasso was the only one to leave. And my dad's car was so generic you couldn't tell it was me who drove it, as where I live at least 20 other people drove the same car with the same color. He must have been the one to do it. Furthermore, he knew where I was parked. When I came home, I was angry. I had to spend like half an hour removing dicks from windows, in -5 degrees centigrade temperature. As I was removing them, I thought, fuck that, I ain't gonna leave it like that, fuck that guy. My car, sure, whatever, but not my dad's. Called Jack. Told him to get some cash and to get ready. We're all black. When I came to pick him up, I told him the plan. We were gonna TP his house. In retrospect, it was kinda dumb, but hell, it was fun. We drove 30 kilometers to buy toilet paper. We bought something north of 48 rolls. We managed to find out where our artist in question lives by calling my other friend and telling him what happened and what we were going to do. My friend and Picasso were classmates, you see. He swore he wouldn't tell anyone about our plan. He never did. So we go find his house. I park the car 200 meters further, not to raise any suspicion. We take the rolls and place them into a designated place. Let the operation fuck around and find out begin. We started throwing them, one after the other, on the house, on trees, bushes, everywhere we could see and throw. We even managed to throw a couple near the dog's pen, and the dog woke up and started barking. After around 35 rolls, the front porch light turned on, and we bolted with TP leftovers to the nearest ditch to hide our asses. We were prone for close to 20 minutes before Jack told me that the Picasso's dad had a gun. We were afraid of repercussions and thought that this was the perfect time to go get away from all this. We managed to run back to the car and drove past the house. Unfortunately, we didn't see any movement on their front yard. By the time we got home, we had a whole alibi, minute to minute, what we were doing that night and how come we were together. Nothing came of it. He didn't tell anyone about what happened, but you could tell he was out of it. Don't know if Amy knew what happened. Regardless, the next day was rainy, and I was smiling, knowing that the rain soaked most of the toilet paper, especially on his house's roof. Must have been a pain in the ass to get rid of everything. All was right in the world again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 136. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit that like button. And if you'd like to get the videos a little bit early, you can support me through my Patreon, which is linked in the description, near where the Hellfreezer Teespring store is. Just click on those links and it'll take you to somewhere you can support the channel. And if you'd like to support me here on YouTube, you can make donations during streams or videos just like this one. While you never have to do this, I appreciate it, and times are tough for all of us, so it helps keep me going. Alright, let's see. Oh yes, a slight confession. You probably noticed that the last story there was a bit revengey rather than the usual Idiots in the Wild type stories. And you're right, it was actually from a revenge subreddit. But I figured drawing dicks on someone's car was stupid enough to let him qualify for Idiots in the Wild too. So that's what I did to get the video finished this week. Okay, now let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: what podcasts are you listening to at the moment? And as an additional, if you do listen to podcasts, do you like when they're more low-key and it's just a couple of people in front of a mic? They might be professionals in some regard, but they're not. This isn't a professionally produced production. It's just friends sitting down chatting. Sometimes they might have guests on, but by and large, there's not a producer, a director, and all that. But then there's other podcasts I've seen pop up more recently where there's a whole production team involved with it, and it's different ways to approach it, but it's not really how that medium started. It's just what it's somewhat grown to in some cases. Let me know what you think in a comment below. Personally, I mostly prefer the low-key ones, although there is one I do watch where there's like 4 people in the room. You got the 2 hosts, then there's, I think, a sound guy, and there's also a producer as well. They all do a good job. No one's off-putting or anything, so it works quite well. I think they all know each other, so that's why it works quite well. But sometimes there might be a guest host in, and that's a little jarring because the guest host has a very different vibe with them. Usually it's also someone they know, but it's off-putting for me because I'm used to the existing dynamic. Anyway, maybe I'm old and stuck in my ways. Let me know what you think in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.